we'll now talk about the bilingual method. This method sounds similar to grammar translation method, but we'll find in coming 1 or 2 minutes that it's quite different from that method as well. Bilingual method was basically developed by Dodson to improve audio-lingual method, and it emerged as a reaction against a direct method, because direct method was thought to not focus on first language, and in this way it was feared that the vernaculars, local languages or first languages of the learners may be lost in the process of learning a second language. The bilingual methods makes use of both first and second languages of the learners, and it is by many researchers later on was considered as a combination of direct method as well as grammar translation method. In this method, it's not the translation which is the main goal from the target to local language or from local to target language. Rather, the first language of the learner is used to gloss difficult vocabulary, and it is not used, as I said, for translating the entire passages of learning. There are certain assumptions in this method as well, which are similar to grammar translation method. For example, it is believed that first language may not interfere with the learning, and you could rather facilitate the learning with providing first language equivalents to the students during the process of teaching. It is also believed that while teaching an L2 or a target language, the L1 may be a facilitator, may help in the process. Because it's generally been believed by the proponents of this method that you could banish their first language from the classroom, but you cannot banish learners' first language from their minds. So, since it has to be there, it should be used creatively for the teaching or learning of a second language. So language may comprise producing infinite uses of a language item from the available finite uses. And L1 seems to be the ideal means of getting the meaning across from the first language to second language and from second language to first language. But in this method, it's most of the time it is from the second language to first language, because when there is a difficult vocabulary item, the teacher introduces a local language equivalent to that. And we see it is there to facilitate the learning of a second language. As I said earlier, this do not mean at all to make people translate entire paragraphs or the entire items of learning. There are different procedures followed in this language teaching method. We could see that this approach aims to develop L2 spontaneously within a lesson cycle. There are well-ordered activities which are introduced by the teacher within a classroom. Most of the time, this method relies on dialogue forms. A teacher introduces a dialogue in the classroom and students listens to it while keeping their books closed. Then later on, students repeat their dialogue by opening their books. Meaning is conveyed by native equivalents, as I said earlier, by the teacher where there is a difficulty to the learners. And we could see that interference of first language, excessive interference of first language is avoided by the teacher, because when teacher introduces the dialogue to the classroom, he reads it twice, and the first language equivalents or the first language interference is sandwiched between those two renditions by the teacher. So this activity actually aims at reducing the interference which might be caused by the first language. We could also get from the records about this method that most of the time the equivalents are provided at utterance level. And equivalents convey the precise communicative value of the target language sentence. There are certain principles which are followed in this method. As I said earlier, the teacher introduces the controlled use of first language, and it is not all pervasive use of first language as it happens in grammar translation method. And in terms of the skills learners aim at, it's the reading and writing which are focused first in this method, and then the other skills of learners. However, overall this method focuses on the integration of all four skills which are the target of various language teaching methods or language teaching drills. It is different from grammar translation method because some readers are confused that it is probably the same as grammar translation method. I'll just try to highlight the difference. As I said earlier, in the bilingual method, we use first language only to explain some difficult utterances in the target language, and not to translate the entire learning items as it happens in grammar translation method. So this is just you could say a timely interference by the first language, but not the pervasive interference as it happens with grammar translation. We could also see that pupils are given a lot of practice in sentence structure, and in this regard there are various drills which are introduced in the classroom, but this is not done in grammar translation method that excessively. This is overall, we could appreciate this method on different grounds. This is not a creative method. I mean, this is not something which is new to the people who already know something about the grammar translation method. As I said earlier, most of the people agree that this method combines some features of both grammar translation and direct method. This method also puts heavy demands on the part of teachers, and it is probably the paucity of good teachers in various second language contexts which might also make the implementation of this method difficult